This is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and I'm going to be looking at another incredible game between Garry Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen. Played at the end of Kasparov's active chess career, and I guess towards the beginning of the rise of Magnus Carlsen's chess career. And so in this game, this was from 2004 at the Reykjavik Rapid Tournament, and we got Carlsen, 13 years old, about 2480, playing white, and we got Garry Kasparov. I'm guessing he was pretty close to late 30s around this time, and he's playing black here. It's rated around 2830 or something. So Carlsen opens with d4, and Kasparov, maybe he's trying to throw the kid a curveball or something. You see GMs do this all the time to younger opponents. Just any experienced chess player, really, playing a younger opponent, maybe try to mix it up, take them out of theory, take them out of where they feel comfortable, and that's what Kasparov does in this game. So he starts with the Slav Defense with this c6 and knight f6, all this stuff, and so now. With e6, and bishop g5, we got a pretty main line of the Slav. And so Kasparov, knight d7, this is all very standard stuff, e3. And now he busts out the knuckleball with queen to a5. And so queen a5 is pretty dicey. This is a pretty abnormal move. You rarely see this at the top level, and I think Kasparov was busting this out in this rapid game, trying to take Carlsen out of his comfort zone. Maybe maybe the 13-year-old, maybe the teenager hadn't been studying enough, booked up on these sidelines. And so he plays knight d2, which is, I think, is the best move, actually. Counters the immediate threat of knight e4, and also it nullifies the pressure along this diagonal. So knight d2, certainly a logical move, and bishop b4, just following up and trying to put some pressure on the knight here. Queen c2, logical again. And so in this position out of the opening, Kasparov plays e5, and this is a little bit sketchy. It's very sketchy, because if he takes here, I don't see what else black can do. Maybe he can take here. Maybe this was the plan all along. But regardless, if white wants to, he can double black's pawns and shatter his kingside. And it seems to be a very double-edged position. Maybe this was what Kasparov wanted to do against the young Carlsen here, is create a very, very different type of position where Carlsen would feel uncomfortable. But Carlsen didn't take the bait. After e5, he just smoothly castled. Pawn takes d4, and now a nice in-between move, knight to b3. So gain some time on that exposed black king, or black queen there, and so queen b6, and now simply pawn takes d4. So very, very smooth opening by white, and I think he's got a slight edge here. Now after a5, trying to capitalize on the fairly awkward placement of the knight on b3, but simply a4 by Carlsen, and he clamps down as well. He's not giving up any space there. And so queen c7, here's a dilemma for black in this opening, right? White is completed his development. Black's problem is the bishop on c8, and to get that out, he's going to have to move the knight. To move the knight, it's not that clear. It's not that easy to do. Normally in the Slav defense, black is going to be able to liquidate, at least trade one pair of knights by knight to d5 or knight e4. Unfortunately, it's not possible for black here, just because of how he played the opening with the early e5 and all that stuff. So, the knights are fairly redundant here. They're really fighting for the same square. We can say that. And so with queen c7, Kasparov, he can't be scared of the doubled pawns here on f6 in this line. He's getting ready to play knight b6, and hopefully someday knight to d5. And so Carlsen plays rook a e1, and I think with this move, not only is he taking control of the e-file, maybe he wants to lift the rook someday and try to jam on black's king. So with h6, okay, I think h6, the point is that after knight b6, sometimes white goes bishop d3, and he's going to be hitting the h7 pawn. So I think with h6, Kasparov is trying to anticipate that. And maybe he's making a little aloof for the king later in the game. But I think that's the real purpose, is that if bishop d3, he'd be hitting the h7 pawn. Bishop to h4. And I think here is where Kasparov kind of went wrong. I think this opening was very loose, and Carlsen's response was spot on. I think it was awesome how Carlsen just played, so logically and just straightforward development, while Kasparov was kind of employing this quacky plan. And so I think bishop d6. I think this is where Kasparov goes wrong in a difficult position. I think knight b6 immediately was a better move. We could see bishop takes f6, and now knight takes c4. And in this position, it seems like Black is going to be okay. It's going to be sketchy. It's not going to be fun. But I think he's going to be okay. I think, White could try sacking the exchange here with knight to e4. But honestly, I think this is rather speculative. And I think Black is going to live through it. So I think the key for Kasparov, I think the accurate move for it, this is a rapid game. I don't want to go too hard on one of the best players ever, but I think knight to b6 immediately would have avoided some unpleasant tactics we're going to see right now. And so this starts with bishop d6. It doesn't seem much different, but we're going to see moving the bishop away, moving it back away from the pin here, pinning the knight to the rook. We're going to see how that impacts the position with some excellent in-between moves by Carlsen. So with h3, okay, just don't take my pawn, guy. That makes sense. Knight to b6. Okay, this is logical. We trying to kick the bishop. After a normal move like bishop to d3, Black is doing just fine. He really is. He's going to be okay. We got nothing to worry about here. And maybe Black is even a little bit better. The knight on b3 probably wishes it was over here. And I think this pawn on a4 is helping Black. He owns the b4 square, and White has an isolated pawn. Okay, so in normal circumstances. However, at the strong grandmaster level, things are not always normal as they appear. And Carlsen plays bishop takes f6. Okay, this shouldn't be a big surprise. Kasparov plays knight takes c4. Shouldn't be a surprise either. This is pretty standard stuff. But this is where Carlsen starts amping it up, and he plays knight to e4. And I think maybe this is what Kasparov kind of missed. And, Black has got a lot to account for here. He's got a knight hanging. He's got some uncomfortable stuff hanging around his king here. And White with knight e4 is ready to jump his bones here on d6. So Kasparov tries some fancy footwork to free himself with bishop to h2. Throwing a little check. And knight d6. Okay, this is clumsy stuff, right? This does not feel right. But, it is shady, but maybe he's going to be okay. Maybe, what are we going to say? Like knight c5 here? Maybe he just takes this guy and takes. And, okay, he's got some ugly pawns here. It's not the end of the world. White has an isolated d-pawn. Maybe Black is going to have a rough defense. It's not going to be fun, but maybe he's going to be okay, right? We get the bishop to f5. It's okay. We can party. But instead, the young teenage Carlsen, he plays king takes. And, I ain't afraid no ghost. Knight take, what is this discovered check, smothered check, right? No, it's not happening. So Carlsen gets his piece back. He takes on e4, and now we got bishop e5. So Carlsen really just killing it in this game. And after knight d6, we can see we emerge from these complications. Kasparov, I don't think he had any better moves there, all jokes aside. And this is going to be tough. After queen c5, pile up on pin pieces. Okay, I'm down. This is good. This is good stuff. And rook d8 is forced. And now the best move, just d5. Opens up the d4 square. We introduce so much pressure now against this square. And this pawn is pinned. The c-pawn is pinned to the queen. This is tough stuff. This kid's 13. He's trying to bust up world champion here. Whoa. So queen d7. This is what Carlsen played here. And Kasparov plays knight to d4. Kasparov played queen to d7. And Carlsen played knight to d4. And so what's up with the knight on d4? Well, this piece is obviously very well placed. Centralized pieces can control a lot of squares. Very tough position. And so Kasparov tries to make a run for it before he gets run over. And knight to f5. Now just winning a pawn. Winning a pawn for White. Now, the presence of opposite-colored bishops in this position does increase the likelihood of a draw. It increases the drawing chances for black, but this pawn on a5 is pretty weak, and not to mention that black is a good deal behind in development. So in this position, after rook to e8, Carlsen just plays simply rook to d1. His rooks were a little goofy here in this position on e1 and f1, so he wants to try to maybe slide him over to some better files. And so rook d1 was good. And after queen to e6, I believe Carlsen had more or less a forced win in this position. He was 13 playing Kasparov. I mean, this is crazy. This was a rapid game. Maybe, the time constraints were messing him up a little bit. But I think the best move here is going to be bishop c7. And, well, this is a logical move. We're trying to pile up on the a pawn here. And let's take a look. I think the best move's going to be queen to b3. So trying to fight back here. And now white, I think, can even play queen to b5. And if black takes, okay, this pawn is really weak. White is way ahead in development. And I think with the b pawn ready to roll, I think this is going to give white enough to win. I mean, he can even play knight to d8, controlling the b7 square. And what else do you need to know? I mean, he's just going to march the pawn. Fascinating stuff. So after queen to b5, I think black can go queen c2, trying to hold the balance with some pressure. And rook c1, queen d2, trying to defend. And simply knight takes a5. In this position, I don't really see much for black. He's down 2 connected passed pawns. Opposite colored bishops are not. 2 connected passed pawns is a pretty big deal. And after something like bishop e6, I think either knight to c6 or b4. And, well, white is going to consolidate his position. He's going to roll the pawns, and he's going to win the game. Things weren't so simple. This was back in 2004. Carlsen was not yet playing like a machine and capitalizing on every single tiny chance. In this game, I think he made a small mistake here with rook to e1. And after bishop b7, I think to his horror, he realized if knight takes a5, I think black was ready to jam like George Clinton over here and take g2. This is crazy. He goes from down 2 pawns to sacking a piece. And the queen and knight, they always say they're a great attacking combination. This is no exception. Knight to h4. Okay, let's look at some quick lines. King g3 will get mated on the spot. Queen g5. Okay. I'm convinced. Queen g3 doesn't work. If the king goes anywhere else, I mean, it's almost like not even worth, king h2 would be worth looking at. And maybe just knight f3 check. And, well, the king can't go back. He gets mated. So let's say king g2. And at the very least, black would be able to force a draw if he so wanted with knight h4. However, after knight takes e5, black can play on. He's only down 1 pawn. Now, okay, white has connected passed pawns. He's also got a loose knight on a5 that's fairly out of play. And white's king side is messed up. So, this would not be too fun to play for white, I think. Black really has the winning chances right now. So he could at least force a draw. I mean, this is at least forcing a draw. And, well, I think that I'm convinced there. I mean, I don't really see where else the king is going to go. I mean, king g1, you're just going to get mated. Knight f3, queen g2, 2 threats. Can't defend that. And, yeah, okay. So that's what's up. This psycho bishop sack is going to save the day for black. So Carlsen's got to go back. He's got to move the knight, right? I mean, if he doesn't move the knight, black is starting rook c8. He's going to win the knight. So he plays knight to d4. And after this exchange of knights, this is pretty much a dream come true for Mr. Kasparov because he's only down a pawn. We got opposite colored bishops on the board. And after queen g6, he's making some threats. f3 was certainly a possibility in this position for white. And this would be more aggressive. Trying to blunt the bishop here. But maybe black is going to play something like rook c8 and rook c2. And the queen is covering that square as well. So this would be a little bit risky for white, quite frankly. So Carlsen, he just plays queen g4. It does strengthen his position somewhat, having the pawn here. You might think it's doubled, but it's actually it's a pretty good It's a pretty good pawn. It's helping him out. But this really should be a draw 9.5 times out of 10 here. Even though white's up a pawn, the opposite colored bishops, just there's really not much to do for white. I mean, it's very tough to attack black and prove white's position, all that. So after, I think, another 10 or 15 moves here, black plays f6, so he just shuts down the bishop. g5, anything like that's not going to happen. And now Kasparov just goes about proving the draw. So rook b1, activate the king. Rook b8, no surprise. And, well, if takes, that's a check. It's got to take, and now we got a really clear draw. So Carlsen, he tries to keep some imbalances or some chances with b4. And in this position, I mean, this is just hopelessly drawn. There's really nothing. Both sides, Kasparov, okay, the a-pawn's not going anywhere. And now the proper technique, Kasparov, he just trades off the g-pawn, so trying to expose white's king, really more than anything, I think. And after this trade, the proper technique for black is, really for both sides, is to do something like rook b2 and bishop f1 for black. And for white, he's going to want to do the opposite. He's going to want to put his rook on d7 and the bishop on f8. They just want to make focal points and attack something here. And that's really about it. So rook b2 is going to do just that. Now rook a2 is hitting this guy. And as long as white's tied down to the d-pawn or defending his g-pawn, he's not going to be able to make any progress or any threats of his own. So g5, Kasparov, he does weaken f6 slightly, but g5 does also create some mating threats, really, against white's king. After rook c7, and now rook c6, so white is actually lining up some pretty nasty threats with either bishop d4 or bishop d8. Kasparov plays bishop g2, and he's got some pretty serious threats here against g2, so bishop f2, and the heavyweights agreed to a draw. So this game was nuts, man. Carlsen was beating up Kasparov like Kasparov was the little kid. So I think an omen of things to come. This was back in 2004, Carlsen 13 years old, playing Kasparov. Kasparov was, even though he was soon to retire, Kasparov was, over 2,800. He was beating everybody. So an absolutely incredible game, really showing Carlsen's incredible potential to be one of the best players ever. And, well, hopefully Kasparov will come out of retirement and prove that wrong, and we'll see some more Kasparov-Carlsen games. So this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and thanks for tuning in.